Welcome in, folks. No Tim Murray today. Jonathan Von Tobel, Jared Smith with you, filling in. Tim off. Will be back tomorrow. And the wrong day to be off for one Tim Murray, because it was a busy day. Legal tampering started this morning in the National Football League, which means all of these teams can conversate for the first time ever and agree to terms within minutes of course, the illegal tampering deadline opening up. So we got a lot to get to. It's a whirlwind of news and information, a lot of new faces in new places. And Jared, it's hard not to begin with, of course, the most important position in the National Football League, which is quarterback. And I think arguably the biggest free agent, considering he plays a position, Kirk Cousins. It is official. Cousins has agreed to a 4-year, $180 million deal with the Atlanta Falcons. That is the news of the day, the biggest free agency deal of the day. We'll get to the rest of the moves, but starting with Cousins to Atlanta, it was expected for quite some time now that this is going to be the domino to fall. Now that it's official, your mind, what does it think about Kirk Cousins being an Atlanta Falcon?
I mean, it obviously, I'm happy for Kirk. I think at the price, considering the age and the injury, you could make the case that they probably overpaid a little bit. But that is the going rate for a quarterback of Kirk's caliber when he's playing at that peak level. And we did see a lot of that level for a decent part of last season until the injury. Atlanta needed this. They've got a ton of toys in the toy box there. And now you would think, certainly more so than Desmond Ridder, you have someone that can at least put the ball where it needs to be put and let these guys, Pitts and Robinson and all the stars, London, et cetera, and maybe they go out and get a Dunze in the draft. You know, they're drafting in the top 15 there. So I think there's a chance that you even like this Falcons offense more in the next couple months. But right now, at its core, yes, absolutely an upgrade. On the other side for Minnesota, the sentiment is, I think, at this price, you don't want to give them 4 years. I think that was the surprise, was the 4 years, and maybe a hair over premium based off of what Atlanta needed.
I mean, these deals are never really what they look like.
Sure.
So it's $90 million guaranteed through the first 2 years. So essentially, you're going to be able to get out of this after 2 years if you're the Atlanta Falcons. That's how these things always work. So I love it, and I'll ask you this question. So we talked about this last week, and I deserve Britain. I nailed it. We talked about what the division would look like. I said, minus 105, minus 110 for the Falcons if they get Kirk Cousins. It's exactly where we're at.
Nice.
Division favorites, odds on at minus 110, about 28-1 to win the Super Bowl. Does this make Atlanta a team worthy of looking at winning the NFC and potentially winning the Super Bowl?
Well, the NFC, you don't have to go up against the big boy quarterback. So, right, you're in the right conference to make a run. I wouldn't bet it right now. Like, I'm not running to the window for any of these moves to bet anything today. I think it's a information gathering day. Obviously, a move like this resets the market a little bit in the NFC South. They absolutely deserve to be the favorite. We will debate all offseason how much of a favorite is too pricey for this Atlanta Falcons team. But last year, what did we see in the NFC or in the AFC South with a first-year head coach, not a first-year quarterback? Obviously, Kirk Cousins is not a rookie, but a little bit of a new culture, a little bit of a new vibe, a tone switch in Atlanta might be just what they needed to kind of get back to the top of what's been, I would say, a relatively mediocre division, besides the Tom Brady lightning strike over the last decade or so.
So I'm a massive Kirk Cousins truther. I think this makes Atlanta a contender. Like, I'm ready to go full feet, like both feet in.
You betting today?
So this one, I'm going to hunt around. I haven't gone hunting yet. I think 30-1 or better is worth looking at this point right now. There's a couple of things. First off, 3 out of the last 5 years for Kirk Cousins, he has had a PFF passing grade of 84 or higher. He's one of the better quarterbacks in the world. And by the way, the other 2 years, one was a 77.7, the other was an 80.6. So, like, he's a very good quarterback in the National Football League. You're in a perfectly winnable division, obviously, because you're minus 110. By the way, we did get news today or yesterday that Baker Mayfield's going to come back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, it would seem. So, calculate that how you wish. But when you talk about a team that has a baseline, I think that's pretty high. Falcons, too, by the way, top 10 not DVOA, EPA per play allowed. So defensively, you got a defensive-minded head coach coming in, a guy who's going to be, to use your term, be able to deliver the ball to where it's supposed to go. And keep in mind, you're going to have an easier schedule given where you finished last year. I think all of these things, do you want to lay minus 110 to win the division this early out? When they could start like 0-1, you get a better price? Probably not. But in terms of big picture, the likelihood, Jared, of this team winning the division, getting a home game, potentially competing for a bye if the schedule is easy enough for them the way that it lays out, I think that this is one where I'm fully in on my Kirk Cousins trutherness, because I think you could argue, I was throwing this around Patrick and Dustin, this is the most skilled team he's had, right, in terms of weapons.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. There were some really good receiving groups, but I think the explosion,
correct,
especially at multiple levels, I think that's – and if you're an Atlanta fan, you deserve to be excited for this. And the price tag, you're right. At surface level, the fact that the contract is a little bit bloated, you also have to take into account the salary cap just keeps going up and up and up every year. So in 2 years, when this contract kind of reaches expiration, it won't necessarily look as big. So I just think all things considered, if Kirk likes the fit, if the injury is not a concern, he's coming off an Achilles. We don't know what that does to a 36-year-old quarterback who, don't get me wrong, I'm in my high 30s, so I understand he's not exactly the most, athletically gifted of the quarterbacks in the NFL. He's a little more Coles, not as much, revving the engine. So I think those two things are the biggest concern, is just how physically he feels after the injury and how he grasps a new offense in a new system and how quickly he can get up to speed. But Kirk does his homework. I gained a ton of respect for him in that Netflix special. To me, that was the moment where I became, I don't want to say I'm on your level, but I'm closer to you than I was about 2 years ago with how I feel when you close your eyes. Can you see Kirk Cousins holding the Lombardi Trophy at the end of the rainbow? I think yes is the answer to that question. With health and with the right team around him, he can make a run. He just needs all of that to come into play.
And I think what's going to be fascinating, we always talk about this, and of course we're really far out, so it's always like futures and Super Bowls and divisions and all those sort of things. The thing I brought up with Tim the other day, too, was what I'm going to be fascinated by is what the market does with this team week to week. Remember, Atlanta was actually one of the more overvalued teams at the betting window last year. The sharp market really liked them a lot. They ended up finishing 7-10 straight up, 5-12 against the spread. So the market was too high on Atlanta, but now, and that was with Desmond Ridder, right? The assumption that Desmond Ridder was going to be the quarterback. So now that
and Heineke at some point,
correct,
right? Yeah,
and he stinks. So the fact that you're going to get, I think, right, an analytically sound quarterback. We'll put it that way. Again, whatever you want about prime time and all this nonsense, a guy who's going to put up the numbers for you in every different metric. It's going to be fascinating to see how highly rated this team was, because the market, at least the ones who shaped the market last year, Jared, thought this was a team that were there just waiting. They were betting them every single week, and you see how bad they were against the number. This year, you make the argument again that they're going to be a pretty highly rated team in comparison with where they are rated and slated in terms of probability of winning a Super Bowl.
Yeah, and the Tampa thing helps your cause to get a fair number on them. Like if Tampa moved on from Baker, you would struggle to find a fair number on Atlanta. But you have a chance now because they get Evans back, and there's buzz with Tampa. They had a good year last year. So at least that element will swing it to where it's not Atlanta's the only team you're interested in betting. There's going to be a lot of people that are interested in betting on the Bucs as well, and rightfully so. Again, Baker coming back, he knows that system. Clearly, they're building something there. So at least you have another team in that division that also has a little bit of buzz. It's not going to be all the headlines about the Falcons this summer, but don't get me wrong. They will be kind of the Lions of the offseason in terms of everybody wanted to bet on them to win the division. They did, and the number got fair, right? Maybe at one point you said you could find a good price on them, but I think because of the Bucs kind of weighing that market down a little bit, you're probably going to get a good number. And if you really believe, if you're part of the JVT Stan group here with Kirk Cousins, then yeah, I would say odds on, maybe even odds, probably a decent bet at this stage.
Scientology and then my belief in Kirk Cousins. The psychotic belief is on the same levels. I'll never forget. All right, so two quarterbacks of name moved. Gardner Minshew went to the Las Vegas Raiders. We could talk about that a little bit later. I think the Raiders are convinced that they're just going to continue to spin their wheels and be a 500 team. Well, you can't be 500, but you know what I'm saying. But the other big name that we got early in the day, late yesterday, Russell Wilson, as we kind of the market expected, he was about minus 250, depending on where you looked, for him to go to the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's the deal. It's 1 year. It's not worth that much. So I threw this out last week, and I think it's a perfectly fine thing. Look, you signed him to that 1 year deal. You're not paying him that much. You're not beholden to start him at all.
No.
Let him compete, do whatever. I think he's going to win the job. I think finding a guy who completes 66% of his passes for 26 touchdowns and 8 interceptions is hard to find. What he gives you is going to be the real question. But in terms of the Pittsburgh Steelers, what are we expecting here, and what does this do for you if you get Russell Wilson, the expected starting quarterback day one for Pittsburgh?
It doesn't change how I view them in terms of Super Bowl contender status. They're still a team that's a couple of donuts short of a dozen. But I do think it's a perfect situation for both sides. I think Russ needed a firm hand in the locker room with a steady culture. And maybe Denver was becoming that, but it was a new culture with Sean Payton. With Mike Tomlin, it's old culture. And how he fits into that will obviously shape the last chapter, frankly, of Russell's career. Like, this is his third chance. You rarely get a fourth chance in the NFL as a quarterback. I think just getting the third chance is an opportunity. So Russ needs to be humble here. He needs to try to blend into what, over the years, has been a pretty successful Steelers culture. You want to say lately it's fallen off? That's totally fair. They continue to win games even though they have not had a name, maybe not the talent level like Russ of 5-10 years ago, but still, a name like Russell Wilson at that quarterback position might help shape the rest of the room. It could help Kenny Pickett find another level as well.
I'm a big fan of, like, sometimes, when you turn right enough, you get left. And I think sometimes we've come a little too far in, like, the discourse around Russell Wilson. Sure. Again, when you look at it from a PFF grading standpoint, his highest PFF offensive grade since 2020. He was incredible that year, but a 77.5 overall. His best passing grade in the last 3 seasons was last year as well. Like, there's something still here with Russell Wilson. And I think, like you mentioned, we've seen before in athletics all the time, a change of scenery for guys who are a little bit longer in the tooth. All of a sudden you find something, you discover something. We'll see if that's going to be the case, and maybe not asked to do that much. Steelers, by the way, 10-1 to win the AFC North. Again, to your point, this one's not going to move the needle that much. Oh. It just depends on how you rate Russell Wilson. But I think you're in a good spot if you're Pittsburgh, because I wasn't buying the whole, we're fine where we're at. There's no way you could have been fine where you're at.
No, not with Trubisky and the mess that they were dealing with.
All right, speaking of quarterbacks, let's talk to one. Rich Gannon is going to join us next. Let's conversate about the addition of Kirk Cousins and what it means for the Atlanta Falcons and more. Rich Gannon, CBS Sports analyst for the National Football League, joins us next.
This is VSiN PrimeTime with Tim Murray and Jonathan Von Tobel on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
All right, it's the best time of year. We're approaching the madness, and for Championship Week, we got a sweet deal for you. Everything up at VSiN.com, where you can get it for free. Yeah, free pro sub, everything. Just sign up today. VSiN.com/Champ Week. Get instant VSiN Pro access. That includes everything. Best bets of the leaderboards from all of us here at the network. Betting splits over at DraftKings. Betting systems, premium analysis. You can watch the shows if you want. And our all-new NCAA tournament betting primer available too. It's a VSiN Pro. Free preview now. VSiN.com/Champ Week. Full access to everything we do through March 17th. VSIN.com/Champ Week. All right, so let's continue rolling on. It is, of course, the legal tampering period in the National Football League. We get all sorts of deals that are agreed to here. The big ones are the quarterbacks, so what better way to break that down than with Rich Gannon, who joins us now. Nice enough to give us some time here today, NFL analyst for CBS Sports. Rich, we appreciate some time, so let's just start with the big fish. Kirk Cousins finds himself over in Atlanta. Rich joins us via our progressive guest line. What do you make of the move? Because I'm a Kirk Cousins believer, and I feel like the Falcons got a pretty sweet deal here with Kirk going over there.
Well, I think a couple of things, guys. I think that there was such a need in Atlanta after what happened the last 2 years. And I think Arthur Blank is an aging owner that comes to the Super Bowl every year. He's kind enough to come on our show, and I think he's tired of watching teams advance to the Super Bowl that have great quarterback play. And I think, the Desmond Ridder experiment didn't work out. Taylor Heineke, they went back and forth. It's really what held them back last year. They had a chance to win that division along with the New Orleans Saints and Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but it was the Buccaneers and Baker Mayfield that ultimately got the job done. So I think, you look at their roster, it's a talented roster, especially on offense. You look at their last 3 drafts, they've used first-round picks on a running back, a tight end, a wide receiver. There's a lot of talent there. There's a new coach, a new offensive coordinator. I just think the Vikings tried to make it work, but at the end of the day, you got a quarterback that's 36 years old that's coming off of an Achilles rupture, and the money just got to be too much for the Vikings. I think Atlanta gets a good quarterback that hasn't missed many starts before the injury last year. You look at Kirk Cousins; he's very durable, he's tough, he's dependable, and he puts your team in a position to have a chance to win each week. I thought it was a great decision by the Falcons.
Rich, how would you grade those 2 top teams now in the South, right? You've got the Falcons, who are currently being priced as kind of like the favorite, but, right, the Bucs, the defending champs. You get Baker coming back. You get Mike Evans. They do have a new offensive coordinator coming in. We'll see how that changes things. But, hey, Atlanta's got a lot of change to do with as well. New head coach. You got a new scheme. You got a quarterback coming off an Achilles injury. Would you put these teams closer to even, or in your mind, Atlanta a step ahead after that Cousins deal?
It's so hard because, we're still not through free agency, so the roster's going to look different. We have to get into the draft. I think a lot can shake out. But, I think Atlanta really helped themselves, guys. When you look at what happened last year in particular. I mean, this is a team that really I thought was good enough in a number of areas, but the lack of production and consistency of the quarterback position simply was too much to overcome. So, I like what Atlanta's done. I like the Baker Mayfield situation. Just think about how life has changed for Baker Mayfield. Last year he signs a one-year deal with the Buccaneers, $4 million. I think he got $2.5 million to sign. And, he had been in Cleveland. They ran him out of Cleveland. He goes to Carolina after, half a season. They run him out of there. He goes to Los Angeles, plays for Sean McVay for a couple of weeks. No guarantees coming to Tampa Bay last year. They basically said you're going to compete with Kyle Trask to even be the starter. And so he did all that, and really, I think, kind of has resurrected his career. So I'm happy for Baker Mayfield. And I wouldn't count out the Saints. I mean, look, Derek Carr, if you can help him and get a better offensive line in front of him, I think that the Saints, that could be a three-horse race in the NFC South.
Rich Gannon with us, former NFL quarterback and NFL analyst. All right, let's talk about the other signal caller then. Russell Wilson, cheap deal, 1 year to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Rich, have we come too far? Because I keep finding myself sticking up for Russell Wilson. Like, it's hard to find guys who completed 66% of their passes with that touchdown-to-interception ratio. What does he do for the Steelers?
Well, I think it sends a real message to certainly Kenny Pickett and the rest of the team that, we're not going to, status quo is not going to work here. I mean, Kenny Pickett has gone 7-5 in back-to-back seasons. He just hasn't really. We haven't seen the growth that we thought we'd see from him after year one. I mean, he got off to a slow start his rookie year. The last 8 games, there were some really encouraging signs. He took better care of the football. Last year, in fairness, you go through the play caller changes. The offensive line got off to a really rocky start. And, it just hasn't worked out for Kenny Pickett. So I think it's going to be an interesting situation there in Pittsburgh. Here's the good news for the Steelers. You've got 2 quarterbacks with a combined cap number of around $5 million. That represents less than 2% of the salary cap. Yep. So the Steelers are going to have a lot of flexibility when it comes to addressing other issues and needs that they have on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Rich, I want to ask you how you think the Justin Fields situation is going to play out. I mean, I think it's obvious Chicago's going to move on from him, but how do you grade Justin? What's the best spot for him? Maybe Vegas, we're hearing now with Getsy being in town. I'm curious your thoughts on Justin Fields. I think another team is kind of in the cards.
Well, I think the Raiders just signed Gardner Minshew, and I don't have all my facts in front of me, but look, here's the problem. Here's the problem that the Bears have. You've got Justin Fields. You've got this first pick in the draft. It's obvious to me that the Bears are going to exercise that and take a quarterback, and most likely Caleb Williams. And then you've got Justin Fields, and it just hasn't clicked for him. I think his inability to process, his inability to play from the pocket with some consistency, third down, obviously with the red zone issues, the sacks, so I think he has to go to the back of the line and start over. He's going to have to go somewhere. I don't know what the Bears are going to get for him. I think the Mac Jones trade hurts the Bears. The fact that, Jacksonville only gave up a fifth or a sixth to get Mac Jones. Here's a former first-round pick that went to a Pro Bowl his first year and won more games than Justin Fields did. So, I think that makes it a little bit more difficult to shop Justin Fields. I think there's probably a market out there for him, but certainly not a strong market like the Bears were hoping, and I think it is what it is. I think the Bears are going to have to move on from Justin Fields.
Rich Gannon, again, former NFL quarterback via the Progressive guest line. So let's talk about your old franchise then. You mentioned Gardner Minshew's there, but I think it is overshadowed by the addition of Christian Wilkins along the defensive line. Defensively, it seems like this team's in a good spot, Rich, but is this the quarterback room, Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew going forward? What do you think the ceiling is for a team like that?
There's no chance that's how they're going to start the season. I just don't see that happening. I think they want to create some competition in that quarterback room. I think it's good. I think Aiden O'Connell, in fairness, he went through, a coordinator change last year. Essentially, Josh McDaniels got fired. Mick Lombardi got fired. So there's a lot of change around the young quarterback. That's never a good thing. So I think, I did all the preseason games. I watched all the Raider games, obviously. And I think there's an upside with Aiden O'Connell, but you have to create some competition. So you bring in Gardner Minshew. I think the Raiders will be active during the draft to try and address that position as well. Look, the quarterback room in Las Vegas this year, guys, is going to look a whole lot different.
Do you think when you look at this team defensively, one of the things that I had issue with last year was they were really, really good defensively, but they also played a lot of bad offenses. Do you think that was legitimate what we saw? Like, I feel like this team really wants to make a push for the playoffs, but obviously quarterback's the most important position. If they get that right in the draft, can this be a playoff team?
I think so. Look, I mean, at the end of the day, you have to address the elephant in the room, and that's the Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs have gone 30-5 since Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes have hooked up. So, that's a big hurdle to get over. And also, Jim Harbaugh's now coaching Justin Herbert in Los Angeles. So, they're only going to get better. And Sean Payton's going to get things straightened out in Denver. So it's a competitive division, but I would agree with you. I think Patrick Graham, especially in the second half of the season when things began to settle down, I think he really did a nice job. I think you add Christian Wilkins, he's a big body inside. He can create some havoc. That helps Max Crosby. I still think they have to get better in the secondary, particularly on the edges of the cornerback position. Guys, to play great defense, you need two things. You need pass rushers and cover corners. I think the Raiders are addressing the pass rush, but the cover corners is something that keep an eye on here in free agency and the draft.
Rich, were you surprised at the deal the Eagles gave to Saquon Barkley today, considering maybe a little overpay for a running back for Howie Roseman? Did that surprise you at all today?
Actually, I love that deal for Philadelphia. You scratch your head as to why it couldn't work with the Giants when you look at the numbers. I think they're reasonable numbers for a guy that's as talented as he is. When he's healthy, he's an unbelievable player. I think you guys saw a stat earlier today that you look at the Giants' rush offense ranks. I think they were 31st. The Philadelphia Eagles are up there, I think, near the top, maybe even number one. So now if you're Saquon Barkley, you're going to a team that's got a good quarterback, it's got some receivers, it's got a tight end, it's got a really good offensive line, and that can only help his situation. And I think the other thing about Saquon Barkley, guys, that I really like is what he does in the passing game. He's got great hands. He's a great screen runner. He understands the passing game. He'll sit in there and swell up and smack you in the mouth if he has to in protection. So I just think he's a complete back. I think he runs hungry. I think he's motivated. The question is can he stay healthy? But I think playing behind that Eagles offensive line will certainly help make things a little bit easier for Saquon Barkley.
Rich Gannon, CBS Sports Network, Sirius XM, NFL Radio, 33rd team as well. Rich, we appreciate some time today. Thank you very much.
Guys, you're the best. Thanks.
Thanks, Rich.
Look at that. We are the best, huh? All right, keep him on the list. He definitely loves coming on with us. I think that the Raiders are fascinating because I agree with him. The reports are that Gardner Minshew was signed 2 years, $25 million to compete for the starting job.
Did they still go out and get Justin Fields too? Is the question.
I mean, yeah, because I'm just going to put it frankly. Somebody watched Gardner Minshew last year. He stunk. He was not good.
I'll be honest. I would want to make another move after this at quarterback.
All right, we come back. We have best bets and more, and we got some pretty big news for you as well. That's when we come back here on VSiN PrimeTime.
This is VSiN Primetime with Tim Murray and Jonathan Von Tobel on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
With so many bottles to choose from, it's easy to find your favorite, all at the lowest prices for over 30 years. Find what you love and love what you find at Total Wine & More. Drink responsibly and be 21. It's VSiN Primetime here on the Vegas Stats and Information Network. No Tim Murray today. Jared Smith hanging out. And the news, as I mentioned, for the next 30 minutes, you can find us for free up on YouTube. How about that? Check that out at youtube.com. The account is VSiN Live. You can see our beautiful faces and check out all the content that we have to offer up on social media. All right, so about this time, we have our best bets. We look ahead for the day. So let's just start first off with what we're looking at. I wanted to start with you, Jared, because I know that you were hunting around for some numbers. I know you've got something in pocket already, including the Sun Belt Conference Championship game, which is going to get started at the top of the next hour. James Madison is 6-point favorite, total 150. We've seen some movement on the total. That's been bet down about actually as low as 4 points. It's down to 149.5 in multiple spots. What are you thinking here over Pensacola Bay?
Well, I'm going to take the dog here, Arkansas State. And I think when you look at what JMU is, listen, they're the most balanced team in this conference. But they've been struggling to cover numbers lately, 1-4 against the spread. Whereas Arkansas State, listen, you've been if all you did all season long was put $100 on Arkansas State against the number in every game, doing pretty good. 21-11-1 against the spread this year. 11-1 in their last 12 games against the spread, and that includes a very narrow cover against the same James Madison Dukes a few weeks ago. It was a home game in Statesboro, Arkansas for the Red Wolves, but so JMU went in there and won that game. But again, Arkansas State kept it within the number. This is an Arkansas State team that is kind of an up-tempo team. They are coached by a Nate Oates disciple, Brian Hodgson, so they kind of take that personality. They like to run, they like to score, they like to shoot threes. They're not gifted defensively. And I think JMU certainly, with their balance, could give them some trouble tonight. But hey, I'm catching 5.5 points in a game that I think is maybe a little bit closer to 3 or 4. And I really just like the momentum. I mean, they're coming off of this crazy upset win over App State. And maybe James Madison, they have to win this game to get in, obviously. A little bit of we don't have to face App State, who's the number 1 seed and who's been the best team in the Fun Belt all year long. I don't want to say it's a motivational spot in a Sun Belt final, but maybe there's a little, we don't have to face the best team. And I think Arkansas State's, they're playing like the best team. Top 100 in Torvik over the last month. That is a very good rating for a team that plays in the Sun Belt. So I think Arkansas State keeps this one close. I'm not saying they win the game outright. Market hates it. It's out to 6 here at Circus, so you can take 6 if you want. But I took 5.5 with Red Wolves tonight. Sun Belt final. Keep it close.
All right, I like it. The other thing that we're looking for here, and this also tips off at 4 p.m., we go to the Horizon League semifinals. Cleveland State taking on Oakland. We're looking at a 5-point spread, total of 142.5. Now, that's a big drop from an opening total of 146.5 we saw overnight. But the reason why we are sitting here and waiting for some information, Tristan Enaruna, who is in concussion protocol, correct? We don't know what's going to happen here. Did not play last time out against Youngstown State. No problem. Got the win Cleveland State did. So now waiting against Oakland to see if that's
I just got a note that he's warming up.
Okay, so warming up, still the official word.
I guess
Jim
with checking in.
What's it called? What was the correlation with warming up and playing? Market is kind of moving in their direction.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I would probably bet them now if you think he's going to play.
Yeah.
Warming up's a good sign.
I would think so. I don't think you're going to warm up and then not pass concussion protocol.
I just got that note like literally 10 seconds.
And you were looking to add Cleveland State?
I like Cleveland State. So the notes on Cleveland State, they just went into Youngstown, the number 1 seed, without Enaruna and knocked them off. Now, Oakland plays, I watch a lot of Horizon. This is I love this league so much. It's an incredibly volatile league, which makes betting on it, especially in tournament setting, again, kind of like a Plinko game. But Oakland is unique because they play this like amoeba zone. And Inaruma's like their big rebounder, especially their dynamic player, gets inside, gets into the paint, causes problems. Him on the offensive glass against this Oakland zone, right? We hear about zones all the time. Sometimes hard. They're great defensively if you're trying to, keep perimeter shots at bay, but tough to rebound. So I think if he plays, and you would think concussion, not like an injured knee where it's like 70%. If concussion, he's in, he's going to be 100% effective. So I think if he is playing, this number is going to come crashing down probably to, I would say, at least a point. And I like Cleveland State. They're a tough team, catching 5. You can find 5.5 somewhere. Maybe find it quick because it looks like he might play. So I might be pulling up my app real soon.
All right, I like it. The other one that coming up at 4 p.m. Pacific time, St. Thomas out in Minnesota is going to take on South Dakota State. Now, this is in the Summit League semifinals. We've seen the market move toward the Jackrabbits here. We're up to 3 with a total of 141. It's pretty interesting because when you look at St. Thomas, this is a team. These are contrasting styles when we're talking about pace of play. Only about 63 possessions per game for St. Thomas, but a hyper-efficient offense with a slow pace. Led the league in offensive efficiency at 115 points per 100 possession adjusted. I feel like in conference tournament settings, we talked about with Stuckey last year, I feel like you want a team that's going to slow the pace down. They're actually a decent three-point shooting team as well. Leads to a little bit more variance, but staying inside of a number that's starting to grow here with South Dakota State. I'm interested to see what the market's thinking here, because this is a projection of about a 1-point spread, depending on where you look, and yet we're up to 3 here in favor of South Dakota State.
I'm not surprised because we haven't seen it with the Tommies. They're relatively new, right? And South Dakota State's kind of owned this league.
Yep.
Now, they're not as good as the 2 years ago team that, right, the game against Providence in the tournament, right? That was like one of my favorite games early on in that tournament. South Dakota State was like 30 wins, like juggernaut in this league. And Providence was like the, are they good? Are they not good team in the high major league? So they're not as good as those teams. I think they're vulnerable, but clearly there's somebody who's really smart. Or several people in a group really smart that truly believe the Jackrabbits are a bad matchup for the Tommies, which I get.
And they fought them pretty well here in the 2 games that we saw them play. They went at home. They lost 81-80, did the Tommies. At home, South Dakota State went out there and lost a close one, 77-72. But market clearly at least moving in the direction of South Dakota State. In fact, if you like yourself some Ken Pom, it is in the opposite direction. So maybe some injuries that we should note here because it is projected 1-point win for the Tommies here, and yet the market is sitting at South Dakota State -3 in favor of the Jackrabbits. So those are some of the small conference tournaments coming up at 4 p.m. Pacific time. Best bet for you, though, would be just the Sun Belt?
Arkansas State, but I'll be honest, if Ian Arun is playing, Cleveland State, if you can find, and I just found it at FanDuel +5.5, That is an absolute wager. You'll get a point at least of closing line value in a second once he is announced. Now, I don't know if he's in, but I think warming up to me is a good sign because usually concussion protocol is like if you're out, you can't be anywhere near the floor. And I think he probably cleared it, and maybe barring some kind of setback during warm-ups, I think he's going to play.
All right, so we got 2 for me in the association in terms of some best bets, and that will come up throughout the day. But we got 2 that are going to get started here in the 4 o'clock hour, first of which is Charlotte and Detroit. We'll have more on the NBA card as a whole coming up with Doug Kazarian. But Pistons and Hornets, laid 4 here with the Pistons. We're up to 5, total of 218 right now. It's been toggling back and forth between 218 and 217 pretty much all day. But this is kind of, again, I took a shot against Charlotte the other day. Didn't go well on Saturday, but there are some signs that the Hornets are up for a little bit of a regression here. They are 10-5-1 against the spread in their last 16. But if you look at some of the metrics underlying with their defense, which is greatly improved, you're seeing some signs that regression should hit. First of which is their effective field goal percentage allowed over this 16-game stretch, 53.8. However, if you look at quality of shots, that should be floating around 56.4. So you're getting some luck there. They have allowed, how about this, 21.2 uncontested three-point attempts per game during this run that they have been on, yet opponents shooting just 35.8% on uncontested looks. Detroit is not the best shooting team in the world, but they have 2 strengths that should work for them here. Dominant defensive rebounding and offensive rebounding, something Charlotte cannot do. They're a little small on that side. And the other part is I think they're just good enough that they're going to be able to at least take advantage of a high rate of uncontested looks here. We saw it against Brooklyn, got some good looks, shot well over above average against the Brooklyn Nets. So laid Pistons -4. I think it's playable up to 4.5. Still 4.5's out there, but this one's heading toward 5, it would seem. And then, Jared, this is part of a bigger conversation.
Yeah.
The NBA schedule is so compact nowadays where you're just looking for scheduling spots to pick off, and this is one for Cleveland.
You're fantastic at these.
Yeah, so Donovan Mitchell not going to play. Max Strus out. Evan Mobley out. This is the 5th game in 7 nights for the Cleveland Cavaliers. They're playing on no rest. Yeah, it's absolutely a brutal spot here for Cleveland. Yeah. And Devin Booker's coming back for Phoenix. It's just one of those that even with, look, in a vacuum, taking on the Cleveland Cavaliers at full strength, it would be nowhere near this. But given the fact that the Suns are on 1 day of rest with Devin Booker coming back, their starting 3, or their big 3, all out on the floor, you just got to try to find spots to try to pick off scheduling spots, and this is one of them. Big negative.
And they don't play again until
Cleveland.
Thursday, right? So they even have more rest after this. So they're in like an ideal bubble right now. But do you think 7's too high on them?
I think 6.5 is playable. I laid 6. I think it's playable up to 6.5. We put in the market here, or excuse me, in the article here today. But I think this is pretty much what the scheduling, like this now post All-Star break, is what it's all about. Trying to pick off scheduling spots here and there, and this is one of them. Suns -6 and Pistons -4, the 2 plays today in the association that we'll be sweating out a little bit later. I'll try to do my best Tim thing, but sometimes I lose focus. Focus.
I mean, there's a lot going on this week, and we were talking about it today. Getting back into NFL mode's hard. I've been so college hoops blinders, and then you threw there's professional baseball happening in Korea next week. That I was like, oh goodness gracious, there's a lot. There's a lot going on.
There is a lot.
We sleep.
And by the way, the free agent agency in the National Football League has begun. Some breaking news here that we'll give to you in the last 30 seconds. Brian Burns has officially been traded. He is now a member of the New York Giants. He is going to get an $87.5 million deal over the course of 5 years. So Brian Burns on his way to New York, and the Carolina Panthers finally shipping him off after what has been a long and arduous process of requesting trades and not getting them done. So, all right, let's take a break. When we come back, it's a full NBA card. It's an interesting one. There's a lot to sift through and a lot of handicapping strategies. Doug Kazarian joins us next to break it down.
This is VSiN PrimeTime with Tim Murray and Jonathan Von Tobel on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
New customers at DraftKings Sportsbook can bet $5 and get $150 instantly in bonus bets when they sign up. Just use the promo code VSiN. DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours. Back here on VSiN Primetime, Jared Smith filling in for Tim Murray off gallivanting across our fine country. No idea where he's at. Carlsbad.
Taking a day off, I think.
Yeah.
Gotta work this weekend.
Yeah. Come on, Tim. Let's go. We just got the show started. You've been missing.
You haven't taken a day off since I think like 2020.
That's right. All right, Doug Kazarian, a man who never sleeps as well, is with us here. Onlyplayers.com is the site, joining us via our progressive guest line. Doug, before we get into some bets for the day is ruled by the National Football League. Big news is that Kirk Cousins is now a member of the Atlanta Falcons, or expected to be. Again, not official. I'll ask you this. I'm a Kirk Cousins truther. I think that he is an underrated quarterback. I think this team rightfully so is the odds-in favorite to win the NFC South, and I think they are a legitimate threat to at least push some teams in the NFC. What do you make of the addition?
Maybe I'll just have to continue my trend of betting Kirk Cousins 50-1 to win the MVP for another year. I mean, I think I'm gonna get sucked in again because I'm with you, man. I think he's very underrated. I mean, he won at New Orleans in a playoff game. I mean, there's been a lot of success he's had. I just don't know. I mean, he's not like he's above average, all that good stuff. Like he's good. He's good. I think he's a giant upgrade for the Falcons, and this nondescript division now has a favorite.
Doug, I'll ask you one more NFL follow-up, and then I'll let you and JVT wax poetic about your beloved NBA. Justin Fields, we're starting to hear maybe some things. How do you see the saga ending with him? What's the best landing spot for Justin Fields?
Well, I don't think they're ever going to get, what they want in terms of a return package, but I definitely think he has to go elsewhere. I think his ceiling is a backup quarterback in the long run. Like, I don't think he's a impactful starting quarterback. I think a lot of his success in the past has been like second half, garbage time, whatever. I mean, people just wanted to love him, and they were raving about his performances in preseason against vanilla defenses when he was a rookie. And then he hasn't exactly had the best supporting cast and weapons, and maybe the right coaching can make him, but I don't think he's a long-term NFL starter for his career.
Doug Kazarian, again, sports betting analyst, onlyplayers.com, where you can find the work. All right, Doug, so we've got 6 games on the board today. Before we get into some of the NBA card, I wanted to ask you, I've kind of noticed, and we saw this coming a little bit, but it seems really apparent, the schedule is really compacted here for the NBA in the last few weeks. You're getting a lot of scheduling spots. How much of your process is picking off some of these negative scheduling situations? Cleveland is one of, I think, the worst ones on the card today, but how much do you factor this into your handicapping as we're post-All-Star break?
It's kind of like worlds colliding. I do a little bit, but it's also there's such more of a magnifying or increased magnitude of these games, right? Mm-hmm. The home stretch, seeding matters because of the play-in, top 6, right? All that stuff. So you have teams that are really pushing through some of this. So as much as the scheduling kind of invites a mail-in effort, it's counteracted by the importance of the game. So you got to be careful and just assuming, but also injuries are mounting, right? Or fatigue or whatever you want to call it, not just the Clippers 22-hour turnaround from yesterday, but it's also like you're getting guys that are late scratches or sitting a game out that you wouldn't normally see.
Yeah, Doug mentions, too, by the way, the big one from over the weekend. Clippers' second leg of a back-to-back, but because of daylight savings and everything had to play less than 24 hours later, 22. It was
daylight savings.
Hey, the new building with all the toilets is going to fix it, all right? So everything's going to be fine out there in Clipper Nation with the brand new logos and unis. All right, so let me ask you this then. As we look at the board with the 6 games, what's at the top of the list for you in the association tonight? Anything?
Absolutely. I think the Spurs. I thought they should be favored in this game. And I know Kiss of Death is saying the wrong team's favored. Now, I also thought Draymond was going to be out. But still, without Curry and the Spurs get Wembanyama, the Spurs should be favored in this game. It does not make sense. I understand Kuminga's very good now as opposed to earlier in the season and some of these other guys. But in the first half last game when they played the Spurs is going to throw that out. But, man, this team's not that good. And with the Spurs should be favored in this game, and they're getting 5.5. That's not right.
All right, so Matt Humans lovingly, I assume, refers to you as the betting bully because you like to bet some of these big favorites to beat up on some of the competition. And I put this in the article today, Doug, where I think the Nuggets are in a situation where they can kind of name the score. R.J. Barrett's going to end up playing. Bruce Brown's questionable, but there's no Scotty Barnes, there's no Jakob Poeltl, there's no Gary Trent Jr. What stops the Nuggets from coming out here, covering this number, and absolutely demolishing Toronto today?
Well, the fact that they may be looking ahead to a game in Miami on Wednesday, that's the only thing I can think of. But they've also beaten the Heat, I think, 8 of 9 games. So I don't think they're worried about that. But, yeah, I mean, the overnight line was 13.5. I tape my videos at night, and I just look at this line. I was like, this thing looks cheap. I was like, this is a rout. And that's when I thought Gary Trent Jr. was going to play because he's the guy who keeps me from betting against the Raptors. I had the Suns last week -10, and Trent's the guy who kept them in the game, the Raptors. And then, of course, the Raptors lost by 7. But I think you have to bet the Nuggets. it's because that second unit's gotten a lot better. The Denver role players, some of those guys that are so young, not just Christian Brown, but some of these other guys. And this Toronto team, I mean, they don't have Pirtle either. I mean, earlier in the year before they traded him, they were starting Thaddeus Young at center. Like, this team's not good at all, and they're tanking without Scotty Barnes. So I would just lay it. I mean, honestly, like the way Mike Malone is, and Mike Malone in every full season, so the non-conference, he's cashed his over win total every single year. He's a no-nonsense coach, so I think he makes it less likely they're going to lay an egg.
Doug Kazarian, again, onlyplayers.com, joining us via the Progressive Guest Line. Any sweeping takeaways from Denver's win and sweep of the season series over Boston last week?
Yes, I think Nikola Jokic is a buy right now at the MVP. I think minus 180 at FanDuel, minus I think $190 at DraftKings, 210 at Caesars. I think it's a done deal. I think it's a lock. I don't think it's going to be SGA if they get the 1 seed. I just don't get that vibe from voters or the narrative across the league. We've had some one-off situations like that where Derrick Rose in Chicago got the 1 seed in 2011 and they gave him the MVP, but I think that was in fallout because they didn't like the LeBron decision. And then we saw the Westbrook on the heels of the Durant leaving the Thunder and then the averaging triple-double. But for the most part, we don't see MVPs like come out of nowhere, for lack of a better word. I just think voters are really scared for backlash and they will be following the pack. And I think right now Jokic is widely considered the best player and most dangerous player and impactful player. So as much as SGA has been great, and even if they're a surprise 1 seed this year, I think their coach wins Coach of the Year. I don't think SGA wins MVP. I just don't. I think Jokic is like too far off, too awesome, and I think it's a cheap price. I mean, they only got 18 games left. We're almost done, and he doesn't get hurt. I think it's in the bag.
Doug, you cap all of these awards markets in all different sports. Is the NBA the most predictable because of maybe the amount of games or maybe just the way the voters kind of trend?
That's a good question. I just love the nuance and the nonsense of these fake markets, right? Like, that's the key. And I think the most important thing, and the reason they are a fake market, is because usually in these index betting, like to win the team to win the championship or whatever, these things that are just determined on the court or field, the built-in hold percentage gives the odds makers a little protection for any movement overnight. But the built-in hold percentage of awards markets is just enough. And the same with the NFL draft, right? Like, you can have giant swings from like minus 200 to minus 400, things like that. I mean, even with Maxi's latest injury, his most improved odds have come down to minus 230 range when it was like $6. And I spent 45 minutes last week when Steph got hurt and rolled his ankle, like researching the clutch player award nonsense because Steph was an overwhelming favorite. So I need to, like, it's such a new award. I don't know how the hell these guys vote on. I don't even know if it's the 65 game minimum. I don't understand this award. But if I can't figure it out, and I'm an NBA junkie, I'm pretty sure odds makers don't know what they're doing either. So there could be opportunity here. And I almost hit a gold mine with the Alyssa Thomas MVP in the WNBA last year. So there's opportunities out there in these weird, bizarre markets. I don't know which one's most predictable, though. I can't answer that. But yeah, you can find an angle on this stuff. It's out there. Here, I got one for you. There's a path for Spoelstra to win Coach of the Year. He's 150 to 1 right now. Mm-hmm. As someone told me this weekend who knows the league, they said, don't underestimate the ability for people to look past the small markets in OKC. So I think Dan Yo's going to win it for Coach of the Year, if that's how you pronounce his name. But there's a path for Spoelstra at 150 to 1.
Well, that's a great point because we had a voter last year, Michael Wilbon, post All-Star break, admitting to watching the Kings for the first time last year. So it happens all the time. Doug,
well, the Celtics say something about Jokic. Yeah. You know, he's actually pretty good.
Yeah. Ridiculous. All right, Doug, we're up against it. We appreciate some time, man. Thanks a lot. We appreciate it.
You got it, fellas. Thanks for having me.
You got it. Doug Kazarian again via the Progressive Guest Line. Austin Eckler, Commander, 2 years, $11.4 million.
Wild West.
Yep, we'll have a lot more on that as we continue on and keep you abreast of everything going on in the NFL free agency frenzy. We also might have a little bit of an upset brewing here. Charleston closing as a 6.5-point favorite, down 30-29 with 30 seconds left to go in the first half.